So, if I had to pick one thing about movies that seems to make people the most routinely annoyed, it would be reboots. Across the last 10 to 15 years, they've been greeted with eye rolls at best and months-long harassment campaigns against cast members at worst, which is a pretty insane range to operate within, but that's not the point. Of course, there are outliers in this, and there have been for decades, but I think everyone can sense that the way these movies are being approached and produced has changed, and I find that change really interesting, especially in terms of where the blame seems to get directed. A lot of it goes towards the movies themselves, which is understandable. If you approach this issue from a purely commercial perspective, most people don't want to be sold the same product over and over again, and big name remakes or reimaginings or soft reboots or whatever tend to be the films that are the most obviously product-like. Which is not to say that no modern remakes have been undertaken with artistic ambitions at the forefront, but also movies have never been a purely artistic venture, and they never will be. The market exists, and artists need to eat. But that market, at least at the top, is growing increasingly unconcerned with artists, and has shifted the focus away from them in favor of the brands they can be associated with, which are far easier for executives to control. You know, blockbusters used to be marketed based on familiar talent, and now they're mainly sold on familiar IP. And while reboots are sometimes greeted with curiosity, I usually see anger at the forefront of reactions to them. Lots of talk about how it's unnecessary. And I get that, because whether you care about film as an art form or not, nobody wants to see something they love get squeezed for money. Then again, I don't think a movie being necessary has ever been the motivation for a project getting greenlit, but that's also not the point. Personally, I see reboots conceptually more like a theater revival or a new translation of a book. I've never really understood the perspective that a remake will somehow replace or even affect the original film's standing in culture. Unless you have no object permanence, nothing is changing, nothing is being replaced, nothing is being lost. It's just a new interpretation with new tools and a new perspective that comes with the passage of time. And retelling an established story isn't a new thing, especially in the film industry. So why are people acting like Hollywood running out of ideas is a contemporary problem? And why are the independent, original movies that people are claiming to want being ignored in favor of more brand fetishization? Well, I think it's more about the market than the product, and right now, creativity isn't really driving the market. For that, you can blame the people with all the money, who don't really see movies as art, but as just another investment, and who want to eliminate as much risk on that investment as possible. And to be fair, if you were going to throw a few million or $100 million around, you probably wouldn't stake it on some rando's passion project. You would do what worked before, what turned a profit before, until it doesn't, because that's how business tends to work. And while movies have always been a business, they used to be their own business, with their own strategies and their own timelines. But now that studios and production companies are either serving or being absorbed by larger and larger conglomerates that just keep eating each other, they're constantly trying to serve many different kinds of bottom lines. And on the audience side, there's just so much media operating as competition now, and most of it is much easier to produce and consume than the average film. Like this video, I'm part of the problem. But I also sincerely believe that the average person wants new, exciting artistic experiences. And those experiences are definitely out there, but they're competing with accessibility and familiarity, with a landscape of entertainment that can be served up anytime, anywhere. And it's hard to ask people to work for their entertainment because they have jobs and social lives and kids and appointments and pets and bills and medical scares, and sometimes they just want to unwind with something easy on the brain. But Passivity does not encourage innovation for audiences or creatives, or executives who think of themselves as creatives, or, especially, executives who don't. And I think passivity is the real problem. Every media industry is competing for attention right now, and convenience is the easiest way to grab it. And whether it's the convenience of reviving a familiar IP and taking a shortcut to audience investment, or the convenience of delivering that IP straight to the device that's always near them, it's much harder to say no to something when it's so easy to get. And look, there's always been a divide between what gets made for the forum and what gets made for the box office, with occasional crossover. But right now, that divide is not defined by unoriginality, but by the assumption that the emotion we associate with film can always be exploited. And the less you care about the form, the easier it is to exploit it. There's no real cure for that, but in response, we can prop up the art we love and not wallow in the slop, because we may not have much of a say in what gets made, but we certainly do in what gets seen. Although what's frustrating about that statement is that if something original does break through, it could easily become just another brand that gets squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. But don't hate the player, hate the game. Or at least care about the game, because if we don't, there may not be many players left.
When I say